That. Thanks everyone for coming along today. Can I also pay respects for the Indigenous traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today? I've travelled up from Townsville, so I work and play mostly in the Bindal and Woolgooroogabar land, so just pay respects to elders past and present there. I'd also like to thank the funders as well. This is really a 15-minute journey. We're going to give you an overview of about 8 years of work that we've been really quite excited to share, and then there's still lots of opportunities, I think, to come around this concept of environmental markets. Oh, okay. All my slide hasn't come up, but anyway, we'll keep going. We've heard about the Reef 2050 plan, and there's a real interest in focusing on the Great Barrier Reef and some of the important drivers that are impacting the health and quality of the Great Barrier Reef. I don't work in coral reefs, so I work on these, I guess, more interesting coastal wetland ecosystems along the coast. These are transitional areas, things like salt marsh areas, seagrass, mangroves, palestrine floodplains, lacustrine floodplain areas. And these are the areas really where we've changed and modified these coastal areas to provide services that we expect, I guess, along these areas, as well as recognising a lot of the services that these coastal areas also provide. So just a couple of quick photos. These are some of the pressures that we have along these coastal areas. We have a lot of agricultural development, particularly in the Great Barrier Reef catchment areas. The top photo there is actually a constructed wetland that was built back in the early 1990s. There was vision back then, some 3 or 4 decades ago, around trying to put back some of these environmental values back into the ecosystems there. So that was a wetland that was being built. So we have this expectation in this coastal area that we want to have these services, economic services, for example. But this creates a really interesting conundrum, because we also expect these coastal wetland areas to provide services for environmental outcomes, commercial values. We also have lots of different interesting species that live along these coastal areas as well, that love to call these places home as well. So we had this challenge between protecting and conserving these important coastal wetland areas, but at the same time we're looking to modify and expand on these areas. So it creates a real challenge. We've heard, I think Cedric did a great job introducing some of the economics around these important market mechanisms that are coming through. And the Australian government really has taken a big interest in fast-tracking, enabling some of these market mechanisms. There's things like the Australian Strategy for Nature that's come through. We've heard a little bit about today, I guess, the nature repair market. Cedric's also talked about the Global Biodiversity Framework, and these are really important international opportunities or drivers that are in place for us to really think about the work that we do in the context of some of the global targets that we have there. Now, there's also barriers to that as well, and Justine Bell-James, who's going to give a plenary tomorrow, looking at some of the legislative barriers. I've heard today already people talking about permits as being a real barrier for upscaling coastal restoration and certainly coral reef restoration as well. So there was a paper published just recently. I think Justine will probably give some more of an overview of that tomorrow. Justine's our resident restoration lawyer that we've got on the team, so we're really lucky to have Justine there. I've mentioned that this is a journey of about 8 years, and I've been very fortunate to work with a whole range of project partners. These are research end users right across the Great Barrier Reef catchment areas. These are traditional owner groups, these are NRM groups, these are landholders, these are government employees, community groups as well, that have a real connection, a real passion for coastal wetlands, for a whole range of services and values that they have. And we've been quite particular in the kinds of science evaluation that we've been looking at across these different types of projects, focusing on some of the real different pressures that are facing these coastal wetland areas. So things like feral pig impacts, water quality issues, invasive weeds and those sorts of things. And this is a real ecosystem of people that have come together now to really try and protect and promote and restore some of these coastal wetland ecosystems. And we really need that ecosystem of people to come together. I think if we're going to try and get to the scale, I think Cedric mentioned the 30 by 30, the 2030 goals that we have around repairing our lost and damaged ecosystems. So can we afford that? Can we afford to really upscale these coastal wetland restoration projects that we need in place? And the answer is we don't have enough money. Government has been great, been supporting a lot of the great work that we do, but we do really need to upscale this, and this is the kind of the theme coming through the talks that we're hearing today. So we do need to look at some of non-traditional ways of funding these kinds of scaled ecosystems projects that we need. So we've been working now for quite a few years at aligning the science that we do with things like blue carbon, with reef credits and biodiversity certificates as well, which is coming through. And can we look at mechanisms of incentivising the kinds of restoration works for these kinds of projects along the coast? I haven't got time to go into a whole lot of detail, but just a couple of quick examples of some projects we've been working on. This is the best wetland in all of the Great Barrier Reef catchments. This is Mungala. This is the Ngawagi land country that they have near Ingham. Been working with these guys for about 12 years now. You've got this tragic but wonderful backstory to it. They're very interested in moving away from the traditional applying for grants to do work on their country. That is effective. They're doing some great work, but it also creates a lot of challenges for them. They lose human capital because there's gaps in funding. So as a way of trying to address that, they're really interested in blue carbon as a way of incentivising the work they do, increasing opportunities for financial incomes to keep that project and the work that they want to do in place. This is the first blue carbon project that, in all of Australia, the first blue carbon project where there's a traditional owner group that's going to be driving this forward. And we're almost close now to registering this project with the Clean Energy Regulator, so we're pretty excited about that. In Australia, we have just one approved methodology for blue carbon, and it is around removing tidal barriers and allowing low-lying areas to be reflooded with salt water and transitioning possibly back to sort of marine habitat vegetation. So this is the only method that we have at the moment. There'll be more, I'm sure, coming through in the years to come. We've been really fortunate with working with our good friends, Great Barrier Foundation, to look at a project site with a farmer down near Mackay, where he's very interested in transitioning from the current land use into a blue carbon project. And again, we're almost ready to lodge that project through to the Clean Energy Regulator. I can't give you all the details because there's commercial confidence, right? But yeah, pretty excited to think that we're at that stage. I do have one slight problem with the blue carbon methodology here. If you look at the ponded pasture, that is a freshwater ecosystem. And that freshwater ecosystem has, in its own right, a habitat that's provided for things like freshwater turtles, freshwater crayfish. And so what we're suggesting here in this particular example is we're transitioning from a freshwater habitat, although it's degraded, it's still providing some service. And we're saying now the expectation is we're going to have a blue carbon outcome. So I think, again, there's this trade-off that we really need to think quite carefully about if we're going to be embracing blue carbon methodologies. In saying that, I think where there is a really good opportunity for the blue carbon method to work, and that's in these low-lying sugarcane areas where the country is wanting to revert back to being underwater again. This is our best opportunity that we have. We have, in terms of aquatic biodiversity, quite low, obviously, as opposed to ponded pasture. But I think there is a huge opportunity for us to take these non-productive, low-lying sugarcane areas and turning these into blue carbon projects. And I started talking about this concept back in 2016, and this has been about 8 years now. And I'm quite excited to think that we're kind of really at the point now where a few of these projects are coming online, so this is quite exciting. But what this creates is a challenge for some of our industry partners who are in the business of sugarcane. This is actually not a good outcome for them. They don't want to see lost sugarcane areas. So I think in the words of John Brodie back in 2016, when I started this project or this idea, he said, yeah, great move, Nathan, good work, going to be a great project. Possibly career limiting, though. But here I am, 8 years, still talking about it. We have actually taken this to the point where we've mapped out between about Motson to Serena, it's a few thousand kilometres of coastline, all the areas that are marginal sugarcane. And we've looked at some of the economics around that, be it for blue carbon, for water quality outcomes there. So we've got all that baseline mapping done, and now we're working with project partners to take this to the next level with some of these sites. And I think there's also a real need for this because this is the real opportunity that these farmers have. This is a screen grab of this particular site with the 2100 flood sea level rise map overlaid. That little yellow dot is where this farm is. And I think there's a real opportunity now to take this opportunity to entertain a blue carbon project now. In the future, he might not get that opportunity. So I'm going to show you a little bit of data. And this is all hypothetical. So you can take photos, but I'll deny the numbers later on. This is hypothetical. I want to make a couple of points here. So let's take two of these land use blue carbon scenarios. Let's take the ponded pasture site and the marginal sugarcane site. Let's assume that we have a 250 hectare project using BlueCam. This is our method and model that we have available for us to look at the carbon attenuation opportunity. Over a 25-year period, 67,000 tonnes of carbon. Let's assume the carbon price is $40 a tonne. Now, that's actually a bit higher than, according to Eco Markets Australia's quarterly report last month. It's actually a bit higher than that. Let's assume $40. And if my math is right, the farmer in these scenarios would look to generate about $2.6 million if he was to transition across over 25 years. Now, my ponded pasture A site, let's say the farmer says to me, I'm earning currently $500,000 a year on my property. So entertaining a blue carbon project would actually lead to a net loss of around $10 million over 25 years. It's not a valued proposition for him. If we reverse calculate it, we need to be up around about $190 a tonne for carbon to make this a viable proposition for him. This is excluding any operational costs, reporting costs, all those kinds of things. It's just a hypothetical example. In my second example here with ponded pasture, let's say the farmer's generating about $50,000 per year over 25 years. It's actually a value proposition to take up that $40 a tonne. He'd be actually about a bit over $1 million in front over 25 years. In my sugarcane scenario, now look at the photo. The sugarcane, there's no sugarcane growing on this property. So he's actually earning nothing. In fact, it's probably costing him because he's paying rates, he's probably paying to spray the weeds. So a $40 a tonne for carbon is actually a pretty good proposition over 25 years. He'd earn about $2.5 million. So that's a really good proposition for him. So for fun, let's calculate $186 a tonne. The farmer would earn, over 25 years, about $12.5 million for that project site. He's probably very happy. It's a good proposition for him. Now, this is a hypothetical situation. I'll just remind everyone again of that. This raises two important points. The first point is the land and the land use and the value of that land use, the starting value, is really important. So where we locate our blue carbon project is really, really important. The second thing is to operationalise a restoration project using just blue carbon is not going to be enough. We need to look at bundling additional ecosystem markets together. And this is where our work is currently at. So we're looking at, can we add in green carbon? Can we add in reef credits? Can we also add in biodiversity? And I'll put some asterisks there because that's still coming through. We're still not sure what biodiversity certificates are going to look like. And I think that's what we're going to need to be really focusing on in these next few years if we want to operationalise at scale wetland restoration projects. If the land value and the activities to start with are quite high, we need to really be thinking carefully about that. So we need to start to think about bundling and looking at multiple lines of, or pipelines of income to operationalise these restoration projects. And so we've written around this idea of bundling ecosystem services. It also maximises the environmental return, environmental dividend return, water quality outcomes, biodiversity outcomes, carbon outcomes. We have these really wonderful outcomes there. We're investing a lot of time. There's a bunch of us around Australia working on new method developments, and a really exciting one is around feral ungulates. So these are hooved animals, and the impact they're having on our coastal wetlands, and can we actually, by removing these pressures on the landscape, see wetlands for biodiversity, for water quality and carbon outcomes? Can we put some monetary value around that? So my final points are that these are really important coastal ecosystems, these coastal wetlands. They are connected to the Great Barrier Reef in important ways. They have their own rights and values. But to keep them, to protect them, to restore them, it's going to cost us. It's going to cost us probably a lot of money. Our eco markets, I think, have some promise, but I think we need to be very careful in how we move forward, just going on some of the examples I've got there. And the pilot studies that we've been really fortunate to have funding come through have been really so critical, because that reduces some of the risks on the landholders to pay a lot of money for these kinds of projects and understanding and knowledge that we're generating. So I think we need to be thinking quite carefully about that, particularly when we start to think about bundling these services together. Thank you.